Hi class, this is the third lecture on typography. This is part of my 3 or 4 lectures on typography, the basics of typography. And this one we will talk about point size, leading, tracking, kerning, and alignment. Okay, it sounds a little boring, it kind of is, but also really important, all right? The basic rules to good typography. Typography works with your layout and color choice to create a strong, well-integrated design. Your choice of fonts and the attributes you assign them give your composition its character, pace, and style. Typography makes copy legible. That's the #1 job of typography, of type. But it also works symbiotically with your design to define your message and establish overall theme and tone. Okay? Now, these are 3 movies. These are opening credits to To Kill a Mockingbird, The Man with the Golden Arm, and Catch Me If You Can. Catch Me If You Can is the most recent. I believe the star in that is Leonardo DiCaprio. The others are older movies, like 30s, 40s, 50s type movies. All right. What I want you to do is to watch each of these. They're just the opening credits to the movies. Do a little research maybe in Google and find out these are all based on books. Find out what the books and the movies are about. Okay. And then I want you to reflect on why the designer chose to do the opening credits, and the way they did for each of these. They're quite different. Okay? I'm not going to play these. Please do these on your own. Okay? I will have this will be an assignment for sending in an assessment. Okay? Now let's start with the actual nuts and bolts of type, point size. Exactly what are points? Well, it's this old, arcane, old-fashioned system of setting of sizes. It does not relate to inches really or to metric. It's its own little world. So 72 points equal 1 inch. Now, what's a pica? Pica is somewhat outdated typesetting measurement commonly used for measuring lines of type. When I used to spec type in the early 80s, before the computer came in at the end of the 80s, you would need to know what picas are and what 3 picas was. Now I don't see where it's necessary or who even use picas anymore, but definitely points, all right? So just if you can picture that 72 points is equal to about an inch, okay? So what if my font is 72 points? You're told by your boss to set the whatever font, 72 points, upper lower case. So what does that mean? Does that mean the cap height is 72 points? Does it mean from the ascender to the descender it's 72 points? What is exactly 72 points? Well, that's it. It's from the ascender to the descender, from the top of this H to the bottom of the G. That would be, if you measured it, 72 points. Okay? It's not just the end. It's not the top of the end to the bottom of the end. And almost everybody gets this wrong. If I had this as a quiz, I bet 90% of you would get it wrong. Okay? It's just one of those things people have trouble with. Leading. Leading is so important. This is one of the most important aspects of what I'm talking about in this lecture. It's the space between lines of text, period. It's that easy. Leading is determined by the distance between 2 baselines. Remember we talked about X height? Remember we talked about baseline. That's what leading is. All right? So for, say you're setting something, the text type is 9 point. 12 point would be a good place to start. Good rule of thumb to start there for leading, 12 point leading. 10 point, 13 point leading. All There are formulas to figure this out, but really you need to develop an intuitive sense of what looks good. Notice how this is set, leading is from baseline to baseline, baseline to baseline. Notice the descenders and the ascenders do not touch, okay? In a text situation, say in a magazine or on a website, small type, they shouldn't. Other times they could, and we'll talk about that. But for small text, nope. So here we go with leading. Here is leading that's too tight. Notice the ascenders and descenders are touching. Here's one which looks good, looks like about right, considering how dark the font is. This is like super bold. The one on the bottom, no, it's too much. Unless there's a special reason that it's done this way for some sort of graphic effect. If this was paragraph on paragraph of text like this, it takes you too long from your eye to go from this line to this line. So this is not right. Okay? Tracking or letter spacing, that is not between lines, it's in between the individual letters, the characters. See this? This is tracking set at -50. So it's minus. See, look at how everything is touching almost? That's called crashing. The characters or the letters are crashing. Here's text tracking set at 0. That looks good. Here's it set at 100. We're going to talk about this later on too, about doing extra tracking. It works sometimes, but normally not in a situation like this with upper lowercase, okay? So here's an example of tracking for Carlson's. Okay, this very beautiful label, very simple, but look at how beautifully the type has been arranged. Okay, just 2 colors, white, red, well, pink, white, red. Carlson's, and then Carlson's upper and lower. Notice the difference between these two. Which do you think works better? It's the top one, because when you have all caps, there's this nice straight line it forms on the top and bottom. When it's upper lowercase, it kind of jumps up and down. So that creates a visual problem. Your eyes kind of don't like that, all right? It's subtle, but it's something. Be careful not to do this with your tracking. Kerning. Kerning is tracking between just 2 letters. Okay? Just 2 letters. Why just 2 letters? Well, because sometimes 2 letters are a problem. You'll get a capital W that's got this leaning area, V, a leaning area. It doesn't work well with the usually with the letter next to it, so you have to pull it in. You have to manually do that. The computer doesn't do it for you. You have to do it, and that's called kerning. Okay? Hope you're not lost. I know this is a lot of terms, but just keep going over it, keep using it, and you'll get it. Here's an example of kerning as a craft. This is Olympus. Looks like it's got the Audi logo, so I'm not quite sure if this is a type of Audi. But anyway, look at the letter spacing on here. Now, I took a font similar to this, not exactly, and I just typed out Olympus, all caps. Look at how it looks. Unletter spaced, uncorrected, and no correcting with kerning. Look at the space between the L and the Y. It's way too much. The O and the L, way too much. All right? This is again a craft. So when you don't do corrections like kerning, look at how much, if you did the blue as actual space, look at how much space there is. All right, next, flush left, right, justified, or centered. I use the word flush left. You can also say aligned left. It's the same thing. Okay? And what is really good about flush left or align left, it's the easiest to read. Okay? You will see especially in the printed word in magazines, you will see justified a lot. It is just used a lot, but it doesn't look as good as justified left or flush left, and it's not as easy to read. Your eye goes here, it's this rag, this is called a rag, and then it goes back to this straight line. Go back to the straight line, go back to the straight line, go back. That is what our eyes like to read. Okay, this justified, by the way, see these spaces in here? It also creates awkward spaces because it's forcing it to be left and right. All right? Okay, rule 6 is about font selection. We will talk more in this semester about fonts, where to get them, how to download them, so that you have them for your project. And the first thing, it's natural to, as a designer, to go kind of crazy and be expressive and just show how many fonts you can put on one piece of design. I'm going to ask you to limit your font selection, okay? Fight the urge. Take small steps and start off using professionally recognized fonts. Avoid goofy fonts. Also, avoid overused fonts. Overused fonts come with your computer. They're Papyrus. They're Times New Roman. Avoid using them. Is there anything wrong with them? No, not really. I don't think so. Somebody probably spent a long time on them, but they're overused. They're given to you. They are for lazy designers. These are fonts used by people who don't care. They're not used by good designers. And here's some examples of stuff just not to do. If you want to put color in a type, in the font, whatever you set, and say it's on a white background and you want to use yellow, don't. You don't do yellow type on white. It's next to impossible to read. So what do? You put a black line around it. No, you don't do that. Okay? Bristol Manor, big B, a big M. Oh, it looks so fancy. It looks like ye old English time. It is really an old-fashioned way of doing something. It's very trite. Please don't do this. This is 2 more steps. These are like steps going down. You do this so you can fill up the space. It would be better just to do all centered, or say best American, and then set on one line, restaurant underneath. Don't do steps. The last one is Golden West College. Don't do this. If this was Chinese or Japanese, you could do this. Because in Japanese on kanji, every letter has its distinct meaning. All right? Latin alphabet, no. This is what you see on liquor stores, on movie arcades. This is not what you would do on the printed page, okay? It's hard to read, and it just doesn't look right, okay? And here we go. This last slide is, these are 2 really good websites that I recommend for you to look at. The more you look at stuff about type, the more you start looking at stuff that's printed, that's online, and start saying, why did they do that? Or I could do better than that. Or why did they? That's hard to read. That's great. I want you to start doing that. I want you to be critical about what you see. All right, this is the end of this lecture.